honestly, I really wanted to talk about Predator and
What?
Die Hard.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so well, I'll give you the whole story, and then I'm gonna throw out the topics anyway.
Okay.
But so here's the thing. As you may be aware, Tiny took a trip to Seattle to visit family over the weekend, leaving me alone.
Sure.
So, I did a bunch of stuff, but I found myself with a lot of time on my hands, and I decided that I would do like a movie night. And I'm flipping through the movies that are available on my various streaming services, and I spotted Predator.
Mm-hmm.
And despite my age and my familiarity and love for, action movies of my generation, had never actually seen the first Predator.
Right.
I realize that this is some sort of, pop culture sin here, but I have never seen the first Predator. So I'm like, I will sit and watch Predator. Okay. And it was actually a very interesting experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because having never seen it, I did not realize that the deconstructionist turning point it represented in the action hero.
Right.
So then the next night, I'm sitting there and I find myself again with nothing to do in the evening. And so I'm like, oh, no, I'll watch another movie. And I was going to watch Die Hard 2 because I've never seen Die Hard 2.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I had seen the first one. But I'm like, I'd actually like to watch the first one again. And watching Die Hard immediately after watching Predator and recognizing that they are both are thematically, in terms of the evolution of the action hero, the same movie with the same indictment of the action heroes that came before them. I'm like, holy cow. And they came out a year apart, right? 87 and 88.
Right.
And I was so excited about this. I really, really, really wanted to talk about it. And then I also wanted to talk more about this ridiculous Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories Recoded Illusion 1.8 thing.
Uh-huh.
Right? Which... And then something happened.
Uh-oh.
Tiny and I played hooky today.
Dun, dun, dun.
She came back from her vacation yesterday. That's why I was not online at all today, because we decided to just play hooky and have a relaxed day together. And, that was nice. And at the same time, I happened to hear on a podcast. Who was I listening to? I think it was Ben Shapiro's show, which I listen to frequently, which is a conservative news podcast. So to most of you out there, I recommend do not listen to it. It will probably just upset you, but I like it. But at the end of each episode, he does a thing that he loves and a thing that he hates. And he mentioned a television series that he's been watching. And he made it sound fascinating. So I said, and he said, the first season is now on Netflix, even though it is a current show. And I checked it out. It's just getting into its third season now on NBC. And he made it sound fascinating. And so I turned to Tanya and said, hey, do you want to try a new TV series? And I gave her the premise. And she said, yeah. So that was roughly 4 hours ago. And the last 3 of those 4 hours were spent binging the first season, half of the first season of the show.
All right. What are you going to get us hooked on?
Okay. Have you ever heard of a show called The Good Place?
No.
It's fascinating. The Kristen Bell stars in it. Kirsten Bell or Kristen Bell? Kristen Bell. The Veronica Mars girl. Right? She's the main character, Eleanor something. At the beginning, and Ted Danson is in it, and he's actually really delightful in it too.
Oh dear. Okay.
No, I mean, I'm not a big Ted Danson fan, but he does it very well in this.
Okay.
So the premise is this: girl wakes up, she's dead. Okay, and she is now in what they refer to as the good place. Because there's a good place and a bad place. She asked about that. It's like, so if you talk about heaven and hell, they don't exist as you conventionally understand them. We refer to them as the good place and the bad place. Don't worry, you're in the good place. But what she realizes almost immediately is she does not belong in the good place. That the sorting algorithm, because they have a computer algorithm that scores everybody and determines where they go,
Okay.
got her wrong.
All right.
And she deserves to be in the bad place. And not only that, she knows it, and she's a terrible person.
Mm-hmm.
Which becomes clear, very early on, mainly through flashbacks. Okay? So now she has to cover up the fact that she does not belong in the good place. Because she doesn't want to be sent to the bad place. And the thing is, it sounded like an interesting premise and cute. And I actually thought of you briefly because you went through the period with Tom Holt?
Mm-hmm.
Tim Holt?
Yes, Tom Holt.
Who was very big on, screw-ups at the Celestial Bureaucracy Office.
Correct.
So it certainly sounded like a premise he could write.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be cute. Maybe good for a couple of laughs.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much, and I don't want to spoil anything.
Okay.
Because the first thing that becomes clear from the beginning is that there is a secret. This is not a sitcom. It's a serialized story.
Mm.
Okay? But unlike Lost and all the Chris Carter and the J.J. Abrams garbage,
Right.
it is very clear that they know what the answer is.
Okay.
To the point where you can, I have been formulating, Tiny and I were formulating consistent theories.
Oh.
Not just the theories of maybe the smoke monster is a representation of the chaos in the world or whatever. Actually consistent theories that have gradually started to play themselves out to the point where it's clear that they're not spitballing.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously have a secret in mind. But what gets really interesting is that the good place, basically everybody who's in the good place, and I'm not giving away anything that isn't explained in the first 15 minutes of the first episode.
Okay.
Okay? So everybody in the good place is organized into neighborhoods of carefully selected groups of people in a neighborhood designed to suit their needs and so that they'll all get along like a well-oiled machine.
Right.
And that's all fine. But her presence is actually causing metaphysical disasters to befall this neighborhood. And so her moral failings get manifested in literal disasters. Okay? There is, however, a professor of ethics that has been identified as the soulmate for the person she has been mistaken as. And so they are living together. And she has convinced him to instruct her in ethics so that she can become a good person before she gets caught, so that if she ever does get caught, she can at least show that she has earned her place now. And of course, you and I already realize the moral failing in that basic thought process.
Uh-huh.
So does the ethics professor.
Uh-huh.
What's more interesting is his own moral failings, because he cannot resolve the ethics dilemma himself.
Uh-huh.
And that is just the beginning. The show, for this simple and amusing premise, actually goes into some pretty complicated moral quandaries without being too serious. But it's also, because of the framework of him teaching her ethics, he's able to, the cold open for one of the episodes was him explaining contractualism, the moral theory of contractualism. And then another one was moral utilitarianism. and the dilemmas associated with them. It's like, you could judge an action based on whether or not it adds to the total good of the universe. And any action that adds to the total good of the universe that's a net gain would be good. And she's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I'm totally for that. And he's like, oh yeah, but here's a problem. Would you torture one person and put them through agony to save 10? Because under moral utilitarianism, that works. So not only are they willing to go into all of these various different moral philosophies that have been written about through the years, they are also identifying the dilemmas in each one. And each episode works out to be sort of an Aesop of a particular moral philosophy without being too heavy-handed about it. And there's still an ongoing story because, like, I'm fairly, like, I have a theory about what's going on in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm really curious to see if it plays out because several bits of it have already been borne out. So, and I also love that. I love being able to predict where a show is going to go because in my mind, that means the show is really well put together because it's setting things up well. So I expected a cute show with a weird, quirky premise.
Mm-hmm.
What I got was a show that is willing to occasionally quote Immanuel Kant and David Hume at me also. And the show also has some deeply funny lines. There's some genuinely sparkling writing in it.
That's The Good Place, huh?
Yeah, The Good Place. I highly recommend it.
NBC and Netflix?
Yeah, the first season is on Netflix.
Uh-huh.
The second season is available for rent or purchase on Amazon right now. The third season just started on NBC.
Okay.
I don't know how we're going to watch it because the first season was only 13 episodes. So I don't know what we're going to do because we binged like 7 of them today. And because it's also serialized storytelling. And of course they are perfect at doing that thing where you have to watch just one more episode. Where every episode ends with either a cliffhanger or a revelation or a new mystery. But nothing gets strung along for too long.
Huh.
You know what I mean? They don't set up things that they don't pay off immediately after that episode. It's just really well put together and Ted Danson in it, he is Michael. And we're not sure what he is, except he is the architect of the neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
So he's like the celestial bureaucrat who designed the neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
And it turns out this is the first neighborhood he has been allowed to design on his own.
Uh-huh.
So when literally when the metaphysical structure of the neighborhood starts to rip apart because there is at least one person who doesn't belong there, and their moral failings are manifesting themselves as physical disasters, he is convinced he has done something wrong. And the core group of characters are actually a very entertaining group of people too. I can't recommend it enough. Just watch it.
Okay, I'm putting it on my list.
Yeah, I'm genuinely surprised.
I'll put it on their list too. It'll be great.
And I had to check too to make sure that it had run more than a season, because you get attached to a show like that, and it's gonna break your heart.
Right.
And my other fear with serial, as soon as I realized it was serial storytelling, where it wasn't just, a comedy of the week thing, I'm like, oh God, this is going to be a thing where there is a mystery and I'm never going to know the answer. Because it's going to get canceled 2 seasons in.
But there's always fan fiction.
I've just had my heart broken too many times by these shows.
Okay, all right.
Like, what was it? Did you see No Ordinary Family?
Michael Chiklis?
Yes.
And he warming up to be the thing. Yeah.
Well, it was like, what if the Fantastic Four was a suburban sitcom family instead?
I feel like I watched like 5 or 6 episodes of that and then kind of drifted away from it.
The problem was it was slow moving. Like it didn't feel like it was building toward anything, but I was genuinely enjoying it, and then it died. It's like, it's not going anywhere. Right. And they killed it. So like, oh. But then I like Michael Chiklis also.
Right.
So, I think we've talked about The Commish before.
The Commish, yeah.
Another show I highly recommend.
Yeah. What else?
He was in The Shield?
Yeah, that's the other one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
The gritty police thing with the double crosses and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't like him there so much.
Yeah, I didn't watch it.
But you know what was funny about The Shield was like Michael Chiklis seemed to de-age for that role. Because in The Commish, he seemed like he was, like mid 30s, late 30s,
Yeah, by the time it was over, he was somewhere, I feel like 40-ish, somewhere in there, by the time it was over.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
I don't know how old the guy actually is.
I don't either.
He was born in 1963.
Well, then we can do some math later.
Yeah, it's interesting because he seemed much younger in The Shield.
Huh.
He had shaved his head, so he didn't have the receding hairline.
Right.
And he had slimmed down a bit for the role.
Sure, and I'll bet you he had some makeup.
Yeah, and then on top of that, because he was playing sort of the tough, hard-boiled cop, he was just a younger character.
Right.
So it made him seem younger.
Sure. Yeah. I was just thinking, I watched the first 3 or 4 episodes of what was it, Supergirl?
Yeah.
And I drifted away from that one too, and I was kind of enjoying it at the time, I thought. I suppose it's not on anymore.
What was the one that was focused on Superman as Clark Kent as a teenage boy?
Oh, Smallville?
Yeah. I was into that for a little while.
Mm.
I don't mind admitting.
Yeah. I'm a little sad because the only thing I bother to watch on TV has ended for this season.
Oh, what's that?
The Curse of Oak Island.
What?
The Curse of Oak Island. It is the worst show in terms of writing ever produced. It's on the History Channel. It's about it. Geez, boy, this is gonna be a lot to go into here. Okay, Oak Island is an island off the coast of Nova Scotia. Supposedly, some 300 or 400 years ago.
Is this the cursed treasure thing?
Yeah, with a big money pit, and they go.
I didn't mean to cut you off from explaining to anybody who hadn't heard.
No, but you're right. It's there's a money pit and all that, but it's an island, and there's a bunch of rumors about there being treasure on the island somewhere, and a bunch of people have gone digging over the years for this treasure, and all kinds of things happen to indicate that there is some sort of underground structure, but nobody can ever quite get through it or to it or whatever, and find out what's inside or anything like that. Now over the last 50 years or so, they've lost the exact location of where this money pit was supposed to be. And these guys have been, for the last 5 years, pouring all kinds of money into Oak Island, looking for the treasure or some sign of what's been going on there. And they've had limited success. In fact, the worst part is, for all the money they've poured into this thing, and we're talking millions every year, their most effective individual has probably been their cheapest individual, and that's a guy by the name of Gary Drayton, and he is a metal detector. And he just has, when he goes out, he's found more stuff than almost all the rest of them combined. But they've turned up things like, actual Spanish coins, and this last year they turned up a cross, a lead cross that is what's the word I'm looking for? Is similar to the kind of lead cross you would find in, say, ancient, I guess they make the connection between the lead cross and the Knights Templar. Okay. So the theory being that the Knights Templar sailed over with what, could be some kind of treasure, might be who knows what, could be like the the Ark of the Covenant or, that kind of stuff. And, or it could be the original folios of Shakespeare's plays that are buried there. Or it could,
Wait, what?
Or it could be ink and gold that are buried there. That's buried there. Or it could be, there's all kinds of theories running around, and they've pretty much discarded almost all of them except for this Knights Templar thing because of that little cross.
Right.
They also found just this season what you could only say is actual treasure. Again, Gary Drayton, their metal detector guy, found a brooch on the island, and set in the center of this brooch is a what they figure is a what do they call it? A garnet. So it's a semi-precious stone. It's a garnet that they figure was cut and set about 500 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So there is stuff going on there, but it's a terribly written show. I mean, it's almost unbearable to listen to. So my only interest in it is in the actual, what they discover rather than listening to the show itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you still watch it because, whatever. Okay. The reason it's terribly written is because, and to be honest, this season has improved a little bit because I think they've gone to 2 writers now rather than just the same one over and over and over. And one of them kind of knows how to write a show, and the other one only knows how to repeat what was just said on screen. So for example, like if they turned up the cross, the Gary Drayton will go, "Oh, we found a cross." And the narrator will immediately come on. A cross on Oak Island? Could it be a sign? Could it be the treasure of the Templars? Could it, he just runs through this whole rigmarole. It's not the narrator's fault, okay? He clearly has to read what is written for him.
Right. It's the Metal Gear method of keeping the story going.
Yeah.
Where he's just taking what was just said and rephrasing it as a question.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Metal Gear.
Yeah, it's just incredibly badly written, but it is interesting, and it is the guys who are running the project are the Lagina brothers, who you've never heard of, but they're the ones running it.
Okay, well that's good to know.
Yeah, but they got into this Oak Island thing, got interested in it in the same way that I did, way back when. They read a Reader's Digest article, and I read the exact same article that outlined the whole Oak Island thing.
Okay.
And the whole, how the money pit was supposedly laid out and all this other kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's interesting in that regards, in that it's kind of attempting to put a cap on something I remember from long ago. So that's why I watch it, and it just ended. It's really quite interesting. And believe it or not, I keep getting little ideas for, future games to run.
Oh, sure, that I believe.
Especially the way the money pit was set up, apparently. Because anytime anybody really digs in the money pit, it floods out on them.
Mm-hmm.
And they think it's got something to do with these drains that run out to the water, to the bay, and allow water to come in, and supports or panels in the sides of the pit that will drop out or whatever if they're disturbed, or that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of weird things going on, but there's a lot of neat ideas in there for a game master looking for something from the real world to inspire his fantasy game.
That's the show you're watching, and you have to wait until next fall.
Yes, that is the case, but I have other news.
Do you?
I do. It's true. I finished part 1 of a project that has been long in the making.
Really? Do tell.
The Transit RPG. I finally completed the first rough draft of the beta for Transit RPG.
Excellent. I'm actually really excited to see the beta, by the way, as I have been saying.
Yes, I will get that to you when I've got the other parts of it done. But somebody helped me out with that. Thank you very much, sir. And what I have done in response to finishing that first part is I have ordered myself some games to reward myself, so I can keep going and order more games later, because that's how this works.
What pray tell did you order?
I got a bunch of Star Wars, FFG Star Wars books that I had not had yet.
Well, that seems like a good treat.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the newest one that's come out. It's the Dawn of Rebellion source book. It's the first source book they've really done. Or first, I don't know if first source book, but first, I want to say setting book, kind of.
Okay.
Because it encapsulates.
Well, yeah, because aren't the settings pretty much wrapped up in the core books that they release?
Yes.
The core
yes.
Book? Yeah.
And it's really hard to call them settings. It's more just styles of play. Yeah, I mean, it's, there's a little bit of time factor to it, but more or less it's the same setting and the same, whatever. Anyway, point being, this...
Well, Edge of the Empire was fairly distinct in its setting because it was pretty much the Outer Rim.
Yeah, the Outer Rim is Edge of the Empire with the scoundrels and smugglers and all kinds of other stuff like that, the fringers, basically.
Right. But then setting is more than just a location anyway.
Right. Age of Rebellion is like the soldiers of the rebellion and that kind of stuff, the military portion of it.
That was the one I was most interested in.
And Force and Destiny are the, and this is hard to explain, but Force and Destiny are the not Jedis. Because in the time period that this game is set, there are only 2, maybe 3 known Jedis.
Well, it's post Order 66.
Yes,
right?
It's post Order 66. And these are on more or less on movie canon. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So essentially there's Yoda, there's Obi-Wan Kenobi, and there's maybe Luke.
Right.
So there's no Jedis. You can't be a Jedi in the FFG Star Wars RPG.
Right. Well, because a Jedi is someone who specifically was trained by the Jedi Order, not merely
Correct.
someone who has who is what the hell is the phrase for it? Like
Force sensitive.
Force sensitive. Thank you.
Force sensitive or a Force user. You can be those, but they are distinctly explained as being not Jedi.
Right. Okay. You sort of worked it out on your own.
Right. More or less.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, the Dawn of Rebellion sourcebook covers Rogue One and the Rebels and Clone Wars animated series.
Okay. None of which I know anything about.
Does it include the Clone Wars animated? I don't think it does actually include the Clone Wars animated series.
Wait, there was more than one animated series?
Yes, there was. There was the Tartakovsky Clone Wars animated one.
But there was a Russian?
Well, okay. Actually, if you want to throw this question
Wait, the Russians are interfering with our elections and our Star Wars canon?
Stop yourself.
Sorry.
So there are 2 Clone Wars animated series. All right.
Okay.
One by Tartakovsky, which it was okay. I mean, they were very short episodes. I think they were like 5 or 6 minutes each, maybe something like that, right? Then there was the Dave Filoni Clone Wars animated series, which is where we got introduced to Ahsoka Tano and a bunch of stuff like that. Okay, Anakin's in there and whatever. Anyway, point being, there's that one, and then was one like hand drawn animation and one was computer animation, or am I crazy? Yes, no, you're correct. You're correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I could still be crazy, but
2 totally different styles.
Okay.
Anyway, so that Clone Wars.
Is that the one where they had to rescue Baby the Hutt?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's coming back to me.
Yes. I like that movie. I don't care what you say.
Wait, there was a movie?
It was originally that whole thing, Rescue the Hutt. That was in theaters. All 3 or 4 episodes of that series, that storyline was in theaters.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's where it started out.
So it was like the made-for-TV movie, but it got a release and it acted as the pilot for the series.
Right. And I didn't know any of this. I just opened the newspaper one day and thought, well, I'm going to go see a movie. And here's this Star Wars Clone Wars? What? Clone Wars? I don't understand. So I went to see it and I enjoyed it. But the point being, that Star Wars Clone Wars series, the most recent one, is sort of, there's no sort of, it is a definite lead in to the Rebels series, the Star Wars Rebels series.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Because a character from there, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I don't want to blow this for you, so I'm going to give the non-spoilery version. Those of you who have seen it, then you'll know what I'm talking about, and I won't need to explain it to you. Someone, possibly several someones, from the Clone Wars animated series make the transition into the Rebels animated series. Okay?
Okay.
And in effect, complete their story, or at least complete a portion of their story arc from one to the other. Anyway, the point being, I got this.
I just want you to know that I am crossing my eyes in the same way that I have seen people cross their eyes when I explain the Zelda timeline.
I know. People are out there going, how do I skip past this? He won't shut up. So the Dawn of Rebellion source book that I ordered, I think in truth covers Rebels and covers Rogue One. Okay. So they're presenting information from those, which all of that was to say, I'm kind of looking forward to it because as far as I'm concerned, Star Wars Clone Wars, the second animated series, and Star Wars Rebels, the animated series, are represent the finest story arcs and character developments that Star Wars has ever presented in anything.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
So
duly noted.
There you go. That's what that was, and I'm really excited to be able to get a hold of that book and dig into it.
So actually, I'll tell you this story because it ties into the stupid podcast and how you got me in trouble.
Okay.
And I think I told you how you got me in trouble because you convinced me to do spoilers, and then the adventure ended up taking 4 sessions instead of 2.
Awesome.
And so they caught up with the podcast before we had gotten to the point. And I had mentioned that I was going to have them choose between essentially 4 different adventures.
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 different adventures, depending on what information they discovered in the first session and which plot was most interesting to them.
Right.
And I tend to do that a lot in my campaigns with the first adventure specifically. Like the first adventure sets up several different directions so that I can get a sense of what the party is most interested in doing in terms of the themes, the plot lines they want to pursue, and all of that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the problem was I really badly paced my adventure.
Mm.
I usually try to make my first adventure no more than 2 sessions. I stretched it out to 3 sessions because I decided to add content, which was when we ran into the first problem.
Right.
And then things ran just slightly long enough that the climax of the adventure could not come in the 3rd session. It spilled over into the 4th session. And unfortunately, without the climax and some of the information that was revealed in the climax, they could not choose a direction for the next adventure. So
right.
The next week I come to them and I said, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know where to take the game from here, and I'm not writing 4 different adventures, so you can pick one. Okay, so we're going to get through the climax. We're going to cut tonight early. And you guys are going to come up with a decision as to which of these plot lines you want to pursue. I don't believe in any smoke and mirrors as a GM.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them flat out. It's like, look, I planted 4 different seeds, or 3 or 4 different seeds. You have found some of them. You're going to have to decide which way to go. I did this on purpose because it tells me what stuff the group is interested in pursuing as a group. But we're going to have to cut early because I don't have the second adventure planned because you didn't tell me which one it is yet. Right? Then they greatly abused Newt. I wrote it. Okay, remember in Aliens, they find the little girl?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the little girl is the only survivor of the disaster, and she has plot critical information, and also she becomes the party's sort of ward to protect. Right?
Right.
Well, I had a Newt.
Okay.
The party came upon a village, basically a pirate village, a pirate settlement, that had been utterly devastated, and everybody in it had been brutally murdered. But not by the marines of their kingdom, by a new threat. And there was one survivor, 13-year-old girl, basically the Newt.
Mm-hmm.
And she was traumatized and terrified, and because these pirates are actually more like a warrior culture, they're like Klingon pirates.
Oh, okay.
She had some pretty screwy ideas about, I shouldn't say screwy ideas, but when she ran and hid while her family was being butchered. And also the leaders of the village had known the attack was coming, and they ran and abandoned the people of the village.
Okay. So
she was traumatized 9 different ways from Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So she attacks the party. And the part, and she can't do anything because, strangely enough, one 13-year-old girl who has been badly traumatized and been starved for a week, she is no match for an armed strike team.
You didn't give her like 10 levels of barbarian?
So the party ends up in a really difficult situation where this girl is fighting them, and she also believes that the kingdom that they come from are basically, they're like the free people. Like the William Wallace Scottish people.
Right.
They didn't want to join with the kingdom. They value their freedom above all else, and they filled their kids' heads with this. So she was basically convinced that they were going to take her away in chains, that she had let her family die, that she was a coward. She was a traumatic mess, and I might have made her too much of a mess. The party flubbed every social interaction role.
Oh, nice.
To try and calm her down or win her over.
Nice.
Then one of the party members lost his mind and started screaming at this child to try and get her under control. Now,
that works.
I can't fault him because basically, among his character traits are bad temper and not good with kids.
Uh-huh.
So fair enough. So finally they cast Charm Person on the girl so that they can get some information from her because they want to know what happened to the village. And the player who cast Charm Person, she realizes that when the spell wears off, the girl is going to know that they had cast a spell on her mind and made her her friend.
Mm-hmm.
So they realize that at that point, any further interaction with the girl is going to end in disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Because now they have proved everything the girl believed of them.
Right.
So then one of the players is like, well, let's just hit her over the head, knock her unconscious, kidnap her, and we'll resolve it later. We'll take her to a better place because we can't leave her here to die.
Yes, you can.
I realized the situation got out of all control.
Right.
And I feel bad about it. But at the same time, I also argue that the party had some terrible die rolls, which is part of the fun of it. Sometimes, despite all your best efforts, things don't go well. And I'm not going to apologize because the dice hated them.
Right.
It made for a really interesting scene. They still managed to get the information from her.
Oh, good.
Right. And ultimately, her survival was no longer a question. Because then the climax of the adventure showed up. Due to a severe misreading of its abilities, they, in attempting to protect her, made her the only target. It was basically a graboid from Tremors.
Right.
And every one of the players got off the soft ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there were like tables that they could stand on, and there was a porch or like a stone platform and stuff. And the creature can't burrow up from underneath.
Right.
in those situations. It can only go through soft earth. So there was one player character who was standing on the ground, on the soft ground, a viable target, and the girl who was just basically running for her life. And I rolled a 50-50 chance to see which target it would go for.
Oh, well done.
Because it can feel the vibrations. Anyway, so the girl became irrelevant for the rest of the adventure.
That's a nice way of putting it.
and that's it. It was fine. And the part, like, this was the climax we cut off at. So they were joking around in the text chat between the adventures that, maybe the monster will eat the little girl and it'll solve all our problems.
Mm-hmm.
Just joking. They didn't really mean to do it.
Right.
But it was really interesting when the one player said, well, let's just bang her over the head, kidnap her, and take her. And the other player said, wait a minute. Then we're exactly what she thinks we're going to do.
Uh-huh.
So suddenly, like in the middle of this, they actually had a decent moral argument about how to handle this and realized it was a no-win situation.
Right.
There was nothing they could do. They had flubbed the encounter. And now, basically, this girl had to be left to die. Or they had to kidnap her and drag her away in chains. In which case, she never would have come around to them anyway.
Right.
Everything she was taught would have been proven right. It was an ugly situation.
You may remember some time ago, a couple of shows ago, we asked the listeners to tell us, please, what they thought would happen to Peter Parker if he went ahead and stopped the robber that eventually killed Uncle Ben. Does he still become Spider-Man at that point?
Do you know, by the way, I personally thought about that question.
What did you think about it?
Here's the interesting thing. If Peter Parker had stopped the robber,
mm-hmm.
he already would have been Spider-Man. That's the thing.
That's an interesting point.
Right.
One I had not considered.
Yeah. So he already would have been Spider-Man. He would not have become it. He already would have made that moral question and answered it.
Uh-huh.
Because the origin story of Spider-Man is the story of the guy who realized that he should stop the robber.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
That's all it was.
That's interesting. I'll come back to that.
Okay.
All right. So the majority, in fact, I think all of them, people who responded to that seem to agree that Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man regardless of whether he stops the robber or not. Which I think is not correct.
Well, okay. I mean, obviously, obviously the big problem with counterfactuals is that you could always argue something else would have happened eventually to make him take responsibility, because ultimately that's what growing up is.
Right.
Growing up is the moment when you realize that you have to take responsibility for actions that you do not have any control over. That's part of adulthood.
In my head, the problem is, though, that the death of Uncle Ben is kind of the inciting incident for the rest of the Spider-Man story.
Right, because it was his moral failing.
Right.
It was him confronting the direct consequences of his own moral failure.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, he does not question his own morals. And without questioning his own morals, he doesn't become a good person.
Right.
He remains a selfish person. The selfish person is the person who's never questioned their own morals.
The commenters were happy to point out that, well, I'll just read you one of them, okay? From Quinn on email. He sent me an email and he said, "Let me answer your question with another question. Is Uncle Ben as effective a mentor as a living human being as he is as a martyr?"
That's an easy one to answer.
Go for it.
Because the answer is already in the story.
Mm-hmm.
No.
No.
If Uncle Ben had been an effective mentor as a living human being, Peter Parker would have stopped the robber.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Uncle Ben had to die shows that Uncle Ben was not a good mentor. Actually, that's not fair. Uncle Ben was a fine mentor. He had good lessons to teach.
He just had a very poor student.
Right. Well, he had a teenager.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Kids' skulls don't even harden until 25, or their brains don't finish until 25. Right?
Yeah.
Like, they don't even have mirror neurons until 18 or some stuff like that. I don't know what it is. Morally speaking, kids are not fully developed until 25 years of age.
Right.
Okay, that's just neuroscience.
Yeah, it might be that Peter, eventually matures enough to pay more attention and to apply what Uncle Ben is telling him eventually. But I don't think that makes him I don't think that creates a Spider-Man. I think that creates somebody who has a strong moral sense and some really weird powers, which will eventually get him in trouble, not of his own making.
Right.
But everybody seemed to kind of agree that Peter becomes Spider-Man eventually, without Uncle Ben.
You know what? Here's my problem with that. That disturbs me on a fundamental level as a storyteller.
Right.
Because it means that in that story, Peter Parker has no agency.
Okay, good point.
The important part about Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man was that he had a choice to make. He made a bad choice. And when the badness of his choice was demonstrated to him, he, at great risk to himself, made the better choice.
Right.
He could, because, I mean, if you think about it another way, if we want to look at Peter Parker as an actual realistic human being instead of as a character, okay, who is teaching us a moral lesson. Okay, as a human being, knowing if Peter Parker knew that he had the power to save his uncle's life and failed to do so because he made a bad choice, it is equally likely that Peter Parker spirals into depression to the point where he becomes unrecoverable. Because at this point, we also have to remember Peter Parker does not have a mother and father. Right? I don't remember what tragedy took him away. Took them away.
Let's just pretend that I'm not going to explain to you an entire run of comics and just say they're gone.
Right, they're gone. like Huey, Dewey, and Louie's parents.
Right. They're just not around.
Though actually, do you know the canon behind that, by the way?
No.
No. It's really good. It's worth knowing.
Okay.
The only thing that was ever explained as to why Huey, Dewey, and Louie ended up under the care of Uncle Donald first, under their Uncle Donald Duck.
Right.
Was because they were inveterate pranksters. And they had played a prank involving a massive quantity of dynamite and their father, who was ultimately hospitalized. Okay, and this is a cartoon universe where people routinely spring back from explosions. So that is the canonical, I think that's the Don Barks explanation as to what happened to Huey, Dewey, and Louie's parents. But getting back to this question, though.
Yes, please.
Peter Parker now stands on the precipice of being responsible for the death of the only father figure he had. Okay? And all the research is there as to what happens to a kid who is forced to morally develop without a father figure, especially a male child. Okay? Again, you can go do the research. It is equally likely that Peter Parker continues his selfishness and piles on self-destructiveness. Or, with the death of, I guess Aunt May was doing okay. And, she did okay after after Uncle Ben died. But I could also imagine a situation where Peter Parker as Spider-Man becomes a villain because he is now desperately trying to support Aunt May. And so he starts to resort to using his powers for more and more nefarious things. it starts simply enough with him like winning amateur wrestling competitions with his powers, but then he eventually becomes the robber. So, if you take away those possibilities and just say Peter Parker was going to become Spider-Man the moment he got bitten by the spider, I think that robs all of the power of the story as a moral lesson. I also think it's an unrealistic thing to say, and it takes away all of Peter Parker's agency. It makes Peter Parker a boring character. Because that means he didn't make a moral choice.
Right.
He didn't confront his moral failings, and it didn't make him a better person. Because ultimately that's the thing, right? When you have to confront a major failure because of a choice you have made, it destroys you. It destroys your self-image, and then you have to rebuild yourself. First, accepting that you are a person who is capable of moral failure, and then as a person who resolves to be better. Or it can destroy you and leave you as a broken person who has basically looked themselves in the eye and said, wow, I am a terrible person. And from there cannot go into the self-improvement and then just becomes a self-loathing wretch of a person whose life just becomes a spiral of endless disasters.
Right.
That's the interesting part about confronting the moral question. Yeah, but that's every. Who is it? No, you know what? I think it's because I've been on a kick with this guy lately. I think that was a Jordan Peterson thing. He was pointing everything you learn in some way, everything new that you learn, and especially anything that challenged what you used to know, in some sense, is a destructive process, and you are reborn from that. You have to rebuild yourself because what you thought you knew and understood was wrong. And you have to confront that, take yourself apart, and put yourself back together with that new knowledge. And not everyone can survive that. They actually had a really interesting talk about that in relation to the Harry Potter slaying the basilisk. Because essentially that is what happens when Harry Potter slays the basilisk. He kills the basilisk, but he is killed by the basilisk, and then he is brought back to life by a symbol of rebirth. By a symbol of rebirth through self-destruction.
Right.
And basically his point was that all education is like that. All education is rebirth through self-destruction. You have to be willing to tear down what you know and replace it with something. So, long story short, I think if Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man regardless, I think you have a crappy story and a boring character. I don't mean, I'm starting fights with people.
No, you're yeah. When don't you? I don't know.
Sometimes. I'm nice to my Discord chat. Yeah. I don't start fights with them all the time.
Speaking of starting fights.
Oh God.
We got a lot of pushback on the whole from episode 23 on the whole Chosen One versus Everyman hero discussion that we had. A lot of pushback on that. To give you but one example, well, this isn't pushback, but this is maybe reframing the way we answered it. Yeah, it's discussion points. So Matthew wrote into the website on episode 23, where you can hear that discussion.
Right.
He says, I think there's a distinct split between being what a character is narratively from the audience perspective and what they are in universe. And he contends that Neo and Luke are, in universe, very much chosen ones.
Right.
The only thing I would say at this point is that they turn out to have been the chosen ones.
Well,
but within the context,
it's interesting that both of those characters are the example that Matthew is using here.
But in the context of the films in which they first appeared, The Matrix and A New Hope, which is what you restricted me to talking about.
Right.
Within those, they were not. They weren't chosen ones. That was never explained, never part of it when the characters were introduced initially.
Well, see, I would make a case that Neo was actually the chosen one, and when the Oracle told him he wasn't, it was part of her Xanatos gambit to make him the chosen one. Because she did say at the end that she told him what he needed to hear, not the truth. So, but even that, like, that's arguable, and that's fine.
Okay.
You know, I'm not going to make hay over that.
Matthew goes on to say that, so in universe, they're very much chosen ones. But he goes on to clarify, he says, however, narratively, both are everyman heroes. They begin stories as average Joes who act as audience surrogates and learn about the world along with the audience, etc., etc. Okay? I think he's got a valid point.
Right.
I'm just not sure that it implies in both cases here.
Right. Well, I think it's an important point that we didn't. Well, like I want to speak for both of us. I'll speak for me.
Okay.
I didn't think it was worth making this point because I sort of feel like when you're doing literary analysis, it should be understood that you're talking from the audience perspective. Okay? I'm not interested, like, if we're analyzing the way a story is structured, the way it is put together, we shouldn't be super interested in what the universe thinks of itself. Because the whole universe is a construct of the story. Right. You know, it's all part of the same thing. So from a literary analysis perspective, I don't think we should ever have to say, well, from an audience perspective. It's like, no kidding, from an audience perspective. That's the only perspective I have. I'm the audience. You know, I certainly can't think from, like, I can imagine the character's perspective, but I'm certainly not going to analyze the story from the character's perspective.
Right.
So I guess to be fair, that there is a use in that also. But yeah, in this case, obviously, when we're talking about the distinction between a chosen one versus an everyman, this is from a audience perspective, not the in-universe perspective. That said, the key distinctions are, number one, could the hero walk away from the story? Could the hero turn away from the story? From an audience perspective, does the hero actually seem to have a choice? Okay. And the other is, if the hero did walk away, could someone else in that universe, could we conceive of somebody else taking on the same role? Okay. I would say with Luke Skywalker, the answer to both of those is yes. Luke Skywalker could have walked away. I mean, Luke Skywalker very much follows the hero's journey. So, of course, at one point he has to refuse the call. And then, you know, Uncle Owen and Aunt May get killed.
Yes, Uncle Owen and Aunt May get killed. That's very good.
Right, whoever. They get killed. And it's like, oh, I guess I shouldn't refuse the call after all, because now I got nothing here.
Yeah.
You know, but which again was him realizing that if he ran away, there would be consequences. But he very much could have walked away from that story at any time. And I do firmly feel that somebody else could have done what he did. You know? And like I said, I even made the point that in Empire Strikes Back, Yoda was very clear about that, you know, the Force is in everybody. It wasn't until the blood test for the Force in the prequels that the Force became a special property that some people were, like, born with in any, like, obviously some people have talent, you know, and that's true of any skill. You know, like, some people are a little bit stronger, some people are a little bit tougher, whatever. That does not a chosen one make, you know. But when it's like, if you're going to use the Force at all, you have to have this blood test, then it becomes, well, then, you know, it's a chosen one. And Harry Potter's a good example of someone who didn't have a choice. I mean, the prophecy was very clear. Neither can live while the other survives, which means you will never be free of this story. You cannot live your life freely with agency until Voldemort is dead. And Voldemort couldn't live his life the way he wanted to with his own agency until Harry Potter was dead, because each would be consumed by the other or chased by the other. You know, they didn't have a choice. They were chosen ones. Harry Potter couldn't walk away from that story because the story would come chase him down and kill him. You know, if Luke left the story, the Empire never would have gone after him. The only reason the Empire was after him to begin with was because of the robot, right? The BB droid.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And once he could have bought Ben a taxi and sent him off with R2-D2, and the Empire never would have troubled him again. Because Darth Vader never would have known. He never would have thought that they were stupid enough to hide his kids with his family.
Yeah.
Just
what a ludicrous idea.
Right, that would be crazy.
Okay.
They wouldn't be dumb enough to hide this kid with his mother or with his grandmother, would they?
Oh, come on. It's Yoda. He can't possibly be. Oh, wait, the whole prophecy thing. Maybe he did.
Anyway, I do want to, but Matthew, that is an important distinction. We did leave it unsaid, but it's certainly a valid thing to say. And we don't have to, there's a argument to be had for every hero, how much chosen one versus how much every man they are. It's not an extreme, it's not a binary. There is a sliding scale.
And then there's Jason, who wrote in by email as well. He's a little miffed at us.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah.
I'm actually really deeply troubled by this second paragraph.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Okay,
all right. So Jason,
let's hit this up.
Jason doesn't buy either the everyman or the chosen one, because in his mind they are both unrealistic. Which I think is a separate discussion altogether. Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, neither of this is about realistic. It's all about what makes a good story.
Right. And again, this is more about storytelling than it is about what's realistic and what's not realistic.
Yeah.
Which I think is where, to be honest, Jason, I think this is where you kind of go off the rails a little bit. But that's okay. Yeah. We'll read on here. He says that the every person is unrealistic because life seems to present the idea that big entities like nations and corporations and governments control all the things that are things of consequence. Like he says, it's nations, not individuals, that control nuclear weapons that could end all of our lives. It's corporations, not individuals, that have the clout to send a car to space or dump millions of gallons of waste into the sea every year. And he says it's very nearly impossible for anyone to believe that an individual could make any sort of impact on the world.
I don't want to be personal, but I am deeply troubled by the worldview behind that paragraph. I don't want to casually throw around the word nihilism. Okay? But first of all, let's first remember that these hero stories that we are told are stories in macrocosm. Okay, they are representative of smaller things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, Frodo Baggins saved the entire world by bearing a burden for the world and just choosing to take on that burden for himself, because in anybody else's hands it would have been in danger. Okay, and yes, you don't have, generally speaking, most people do not end up in situations where they even have that power.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody has someone in their life who is suffering. I can guarantee it. And everybody has the chance in their life to carry the burdens of that person, for just a little way, to make life a little bit easier for them and to make that person's life a better life. So you're right. You can't, you probably do not have the power to destroy or save the world entirely, in toto. But every person does have the power to make some kind of a difference. You have, every human being has power to impose some level of order on the world around them, to somehow order the chaos around them. And it might be you can only do small things. Some people can do more than small things. You point out it's a giant corporation that had the clout to send a car to space. Yeah, but that giant corporation that exists now was pretty much built entirely by one visionary.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, neither you, Brian, nor I are fans of Elon Musk per se.
Not particularly.
But we cannot deny that ultimately, everything that came out of SpaceX, he built.
Yep.
You know, that was one person, you know, and he had to work damn hard to do it. It was not easy, you know, and he had to have some natural talent and he had to have some natural skill and some natural smarts. But what he had to have more than that was just the industriousness to work at it to make it happen. But, you know, on a more smaller scale, you know, everybody is going to be confronted with moral issues in their lives. And that's why these stories exist. They exist to tell us, you know, so that we don't have to see our uncle get killed before we do the morally right thing when we're given the opportunity. Because we remember when Spider-Man did it. They give us the chance to imagine ourselves in those situations so that when, God forbid, one of those situations presents itself, you know, we're there to do it. And you can say that one individual doesn't have the power to make a difference or anything like that. And, you know, it's like, look back. So, I mean, take for example, I know this is going back a ways, it's September 11th. 9/11. Flight 800, because there were 4 flights that had been taken over by terrorist extremists. 3 of them had been flown into buildings, 2 into the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon. And 1 was downed because the passengers were paying attention on their cell phones and they knew what was going on with these other planes, and they realized their plane was going to be used as a weapon to kill many people. And they stormed the cockpit and forced the plane to crash into the ground. That was a very, very small number of people. You know, you consider the people who were actually active on the flight who took that action, you know, and gave their lives. That's a very small action. That's not a corporation. That's not, that's not a nation. That was a group of people who were confronted in an unimaginably terrible situation and chose to do the right thing, you know, at the expense of their own lives. Okay? The reason why the every person story is such a good story is because it reminds us that although we may never be confronted with the opportunity to save the world, okay, each of us has in us the capacity for both good and evil. And we are someday going to have to make a choice between those two to make the world a better or a worse place. You know, and I think the idea that I'm an individual and I don't have the power to do anything worthwhile, that's a really, I hate to say it, and I know this is probably a mean thing to say, I think that's a sad viewpoint. Okay, it disrespects your own personal power and your own agency and the value of small actions.
It's an extremely effective way to disenfranchise yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know our sponsor, Gamer Concepts at gamerconcepts.com, the people who do the gamer t-shirts that have been at Gen Con and Dragon Con or whatever. KublaCon, I guess it is.
Yeah, I have heard of them.
Do you have those guys or gals at your table who, the minute a potion turns up in the dungeon, they immediately drink it to find out what's going on with it?
No, I actually have the exact opposite. I have the people who are terrified to drink potions, but that may be my fault.
That could be your fault, I suppose. Oh, it's a potion. It must be good and have magical properties. And I'm clearly meant to drink it right now because it must help me with some part of this dungeon later on, right? Sometimes it's helpful to signal what you are in terms of potion drinkers. This theoretical, hypothetical other guy would need this potion tester t-shirt from Gamer Concepts, which says, I drink weird liquids found in strange places. Head on over, check it out at gamerconcepts.com and tell them we sent you. We have big news. It's not our big news.
No, it's not.
It's somebody else's big news.
Right.
It's the kind of big news that we never thought would happen, because I'm like you, I'm pretty sure at some point we were told it would never happen. Or it was heavily hinted that it would never happen.
That it would never happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I thought a recent release was of a product by them was specifically done in lieu of this big... Let's stop beating around the bush.
Okay.
So we can...
Pathfinder 2.0. Dun, dun, dun. What?
That's the sting you went with?
What do you want from me?
I don't know. I was thinking more of a dun-dun-dun.
Dun-dun-dun.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. We'll work one of those in.
Well, actually, at this point, we don't know which particular sting it will deserve.
We don't. We have no idea. But yes, yeah. Pathfinder 2.0 has been announced, and it is. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the page on which the details are contained, and I don't know what to think.
It is an interesting way to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Pathfinder.
Yes, by killing it and then rebirthing it. That is certainly one way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's not a whole, I don't know. I haven't been diligent in reading all of this stuff. You called my attention to it the other day.
Yeah.
Because I'm so absorbed in my own stuff lately that I'm not even paying attention to what's going on in the rest of the world. And I gave a cursory glance over the stuff, the information that has been released. I didn't go looking for more information, so if there's more information than what's on the Paizo blog,
I'm going
and the
to
connected FAQ and playtest page.
I'm going to go with anything that is not on the official page is mere speculation or open to too much interpretation.
Right, which we don't want to deal with. Anyway,
right.
Let's speculate and interpret.
Okay. All right. So to recap, for those of you who have not yet heard, there's going to be a Pathfinder playtest of Pathfinder 2.0, or Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I guess is what they're calling it. Mm-hmm. It launches on August 2nd of this year. Mm-hmm. Now.
That's the playtest launches on August 2nd.
Right.
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 They say, Paizo, they say that the new Pathfinder playtest rules are the first step in the evolution to the new edition. They've incorporated the best innovations and lessons of the last 10 years to move the game forward in new and exciting ways. They have a long list of things they are going to talk about between now and then.
Yes.
But it seems...
And I think we should be clear right off the bat to anybody who's listening. We will not be following this news as each story breaks and discussing each piece of information in turn.
Gosh,
right?
No.
Okay. If something particularly interesting happens to catch our eye that they discuss, we could certainly revisit the topic.
Mm-hmm.
But I really have no... Well, I did that back in 4th edition. Okay? When 4th edition was coming out, I hung on every bit of information that came out.
Right.
And I don't ever want to do that again.
No. It proves to be unfruitful.
Yeah. And I will say that to a certain extent it was kind of fun analyzing things and getting excited and trying to disentangle stuff. But I don't have that kind of time and energy in my life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as young as I was 10 years ago. I guess that's both a hyperbole and a tautology, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, getting back to the subject at hand.
Okay. I'm going to hit highlights, all right?
Yes, please.
Supposedly, 2nd edition is going to have 12 classes.
Mm-hmm.
Which seems like a lot.
That's pretty much the same. I mean, that's what they've got now, isn't it, in core?
Is it?
And, yeah.
Okay.
Isn't it? It's pretty close to there. It's like 10 to 12.
Okay.
Because it's just like 3.0 had, or 3.5 had 12 classes, didn't it?
Maybe.
And they pretty much had the same classes.
Okay.
Again, we're talking core Pathfinder.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Back when you only needed one $60 book to play the game. 2 if you needed a monster library.
All right. Fine. All right. So I don't know how really best to approach this. They say that the game is second edition is going to feel just like the game you know and love, and I presume they mean Pathfinder first edition when they say that.
Right.
Okay.
But they have to say that.
Yeah. No, it's going to be totally different. It's going to suck, and you're going to hate it.
Well, they don't even have to say it's going to suck and you're going to hate it. They would just have our goal was to completely remake the game and go in a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically saying, please don't change over. Don't check it out. You're not going to like it. We changed it all.
Right.
So, no, they have to say that it's going to feel just like the game you know and love. But I will point out that considering that this is the first step in the evolving game that will be second edition Pathfinder,
right? I
think it's a little premature for them to tell me what it's going to feel like.
They might get feedback that says it feels wrong. And that they really need to rejigger the whole thing, and then it won't feel anything like the old. I don't know.
Right.
It's hard to tell.
I will also point out that this exact same line was used to advertise 3rd edition and 4th edition and 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
It's just like the game you know and love.
It's amazing how often that crops up.
Right? Because they have to say, because that's the reassurance.
Yep.
Because the first thing that happens as soon as you say you're coming out with a new edition is you panic people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like the game I'm playing now, or I wouldn't be playing it
now. Here's the thing, okay? And I made this point yesterday to somebody.
Okay.
And I will make it now here before we go any further. All right.
Mm-hmm.
They do not turn off the functionality of old editions. If you don't like the new edition, if you don't like the new edition, you can always continue to play the old edition.
Though there are some players whose enjoyment derives from number 1 published modules and hang on the latest published module releases,
right?
Especially in Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of players whose enjoyment of Pathfinder is predicated on organized play.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to imagine that organized play is changing to second edition, whether you want it to or not.
Mm-hmm.
And number 3, there are a number of players whose enjoyment of the game is predicated on new source books.
Right.
They enjoy getting the new source book and incorporating new stuff into the game.
Sure.
And all of that functionality will go away if you want to keep Pathfinder first edition.
Mm.
So I'm not disagreeing with you that the old game doesn't go away, and if you love the game, keep playing it. But a lot of times
right.
that gets used to turn off a voice of a certain fan base that has a different way of enjoying the game from you. And when Paizo is rolling out a new game, they deserve to hear from all of the fans.
Oh, absolutely.
Including the ones who do not want to lose those aspects of enjoying the game simply because they decided it's time for a new edition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm just being the
okay.
Yeah,
you're being the fair one.
Right. I have to do that occasionally, or else that muscle gets rusted.
Right.
Or atrophied, or whatever muscles do.
All right. There are no more races in Pathfinder 2.0. They are now.
I think you're burying the lead there.
Well, let's say I'm putting something.
That was a very clickbaity thing to say.
It was. I know. There are no more races. Instead, they're being called ancestries now. In second edition.
Honestly, I've been waiting for someone to come up with a new term for race anyway.
Well, there it is. It's ancestry.
Yeah. Right. I always like sci-fi games, they could get away with species, which I always thought was good.
Mm-hmm.
But,
there are backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Your class. And I think there was something else, but it sounded, and I'm not sure if this is actually different or just sounds different.
What they're saying is then your class has, within it a variety of choices to make.
Right.
So honestly, the interesting thing in that sentence or in this statement is the background thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is 5th edition character.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if they converted to doing this a while ago or if this is totally new, but it sounds a lot like the process of character creation in 5th edition.
Yeah, and they specifically say, for background, it represents how you were raised and what you did before taking up the life of an adventurer.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it would be stupid to assume that Paizo doesn't read what WotC does, and WotC doesn't read what Paizo does, because we know they do.
Mm-hmm.
And the backgrounds were a neat aspect of 5th edition. So
yeah, you've got ancestry feats that you can choose from.
Mm-hmm. That was a neat idea from 4th edition D&D.
Yeah,
racial feats.
And then.
But I think at some point in the past, Pathfinder also incorporated them. But I'm pretty sure because they were core in 4th edition when Pathfinder was still being released. So
okay.
I just don't want to get yelled at by one group of fans oh no, Pathfinder did first because they did it in this stupid source book.
Yeah, you're fine. Don't silence those voices.
I can silence whatever voices I want. I'm not Paizo. I don't have to listen to people.
Apparently, your bonuses are now determined by one unified system of proficiency based on your character's level. That sounds familiar.
Huh. So there's a proficiency bonus based on your level.
And I don't care if they copied it. I really don't. It doesn't make any difference to me.
No, of course not. It is just very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll continue to gain experience and eventually level up. So there you go.
This is another interesting line here. Pathfinder characters have exciting and important choices to make every time they gain a level.
Uh-huh.
From selecting new class feats to adding new spells to their repertoire. That specific line was a tagline for 4th edition D&D.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
But didn't the first edition of Pathfinder also rejigger where bonuses came in and new stuff came and happened in your leveling? They
tried to level it out, but there were still dead levels for several of the core classes. Specifically the fighter. The fighter possessed a lot of dead levels, and several of their what they're referring to not just is the levels that don't give you anything, but that there are a certain number of levels that just give you mechanical bonuses. Like armor mastery, you get an additional plus to when you're wearing certain types of armor and stuff, which are boring abilities because they don't represent a choice.
Right. They would like you to know that they've cleaned up the overall flow of play.
Okay.
And they've broken play up into 3 distinct components. Encounter mode, which is what happens when you're in a fight, measuring time in seconds, blah, blah, blah. Exploration mode is measured in minutes and hours, representing travel and investigation, etc., etc. They say exploration mode is the most flexible. And finally, there's downtime mode, when your characters are back in town or relative safety, allowing them to retrain abilities, practice a trade, lead an organization, craft items, or recuperate from wounds.
It's neat that they're structuring that.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's a very old idea.
Right.
Right. Remember what was it? Turns and rounds in the old editions of D&D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, look, they added reactions.
Yeah.
So they're okay. I gotta be flippant here now. They're making the Pathfinder 5th edition.
Yeah.
Pathfinder 2nd edition is going to be to 5th edition D&D what Pathfinder 1st edition was to 3rd edition D&D. What are they losing market share back to D&D? And now they're going to get it back? Is this... I'm sorry.
It's weird.
Wow.
They've decided that rather than having like minor actions and what do we call them? Standard actions and that kind of stuff, right?
Well, now it's just action and move.
Yeah, it's just actions and moves. You get
right.
no more different types of actions. It's you get 3 actions on your turn in any combination.
Mm-hmm. So that's actually also a neat idea.
Mm-hmm. And spell timing is different too. Or maybe not timing, but the spell costs. Like some spells apparently take 2 actions to cast.
Right.
But some only take 1.
Well, it looks like actually what that, like, specifically their example of magic missile saying that you can use it, you can cast it from 1 to 3 actions, giving you an additional missile for each action you spend on casting it.
Yes, they're very excited about that too.
Right. Well, that's a feature of magic missile, that it fires multiple missiles already. So it seems like what they're actually doing with that is maybe using it to balance what spells are capable of to bring it down a little bit and more in line with, so fighters can make multiple attacks, and if a wizard spell can hit multiple targets, then they have to chew up the same resources that fighters have to choose to hit 3 targets. It seems like an action economy balancing move, which I thoroughly approve of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think you just pointed out the reactions between turns.
Yep.
And stuff like that.
Yeah. I skipped the paragraph that you were looking at.
No, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Monsters are supposedly easier design. Hazards.
They're moving away from strict construction. See, I don't want to skip over this because this is a very interesting
Go for it.
Too.
Dig in.
So monsters are a lot easier to design. We've moved away from strict construction formulas based off type and hit die. Instead, we start on deciding the creature's rough level and role in the game, and then select statistics that make it balanced and appropriate part of the game. And that smacks to me of splitting the difference between 4th edition and 5th edition D&D monster design.
Right.
And honestly, if that is true, they might get a convert from D&D to Pathfinder 2nd edition in me just because they're bringing back the monster roll stuff that was a really good idea that 5th edition abandoned. Yeah, and then the other thing they it looks like they're doing is adding unique actions to monsters in the same way that 4th and 5th edition D&D do.
The items in the game are apparently going to be handled differently.
Are you reading the magic item chapter or paragraph there?
Yeah, of all the systems the game masters interact with, magic items are one of the most important, so we spent extra time ensuring that they are interesting and fun.
That's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. That would help.
I wonder why no one ever hit on that. You know what? We should just make this part of the game interesting and fun.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's what we've been screwing up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's such a vacuous thing to say.
Right.
We decided to make this part fun because, you deserve a little fun.
So basically, armor and weapons still matter, obviously. Okay.
Right.
But a lot of the trinkety things, a lot of the smaller items like rings and I don't know what else, necklaces and tiaras and pointy shoes, whatever it is. They are not so much about boosting your saving throws or ability scores anymore. So you don't have to carry quite as many of them and that kind of stuff. But instead, the magic items you find will grant you new things to do during play instead of boosting stats.
Right, which is, again, a promise that D&D just keeps making.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're going to tone down the mechanical bonus stuff on magic items because that's boring. And then instead, we're going to focus on magic items that give you cool new things to do. Which is, again, I'm fine with that. Like, I like the idea of magic items adding verbs.
Mm-hmm.
But
mm-hmm.
I still feel like they're missing something fundamental here.
Right.
And I don't want to say it out loud because I want a reason for people to buy the Angry RPG that I'm not writing.
Right.
So I'm going to keep that one to myself for now. I am glad to see that it does look like they're at least making one of the same mistakes that all the other games just keep making right here.
Yeah.
Wow, and isn't that like egomaniacal of me?
It is. It is terribly.
Like, wow, I am really full of myself, huh?
Right. This is pretty much all we know about things so far, I have to say.
Well, there is the FAQ also.
There's the FAQ, which yeah.
Well, I want to bring up the FAQ because it specifically answers a question that you started with.
Yes.
Didn't you say you would never do a second edition? The answer is no. We never said that.
Uh-huh. Okay.
It then goes on to explain, but it just starts with, no, we never said that. I don't remember you saying, did you say that? No, we didn't say that. We didn't.
So tell me then, why does 95% of the internet think that?
Because they see, and now I'm going to get in trouble with all the Paizo apologists here.
Hooray.
Okay. Here's the deal. And I don't care whether you agree or what you believe or what they explicitly said or whatever, because there is a lot more to what a company says than what they actually say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Pathfinder was very specifically marketed to Dungeons and Dragons players of 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons who did not want to change editions, who felt that the edition change from 3rd edition to 4th edition was kicking the chair out from under them, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, you could say, well, they never technically said, and you're right, they never technically said we're never going to do another edition. But what they did advertise very stringently was keep playing the edition of the game you love, and we're going to let you do that. You don't have to change editions. You stay with it. That was the promise that drew like Paizo went from no market share because they didn't have a role-playing game of their own to basically the same amount of market share as D&D on that advertising. And you can say, well, people misheard because they didn't specifically say, and yada, yada, yada. It wasn't really a lie. And you're right. It wasn't really a lie. They didn't commit a lie. You could say it was a lie of omission, or you could just say it was thoughtless, or you could just say it was marketing speak. But one way or the other, the game was sold on this promise of stick with the edition you love and you don't have to change.
Right.
So no matter what you want to think about what Pathfinder did and didn't say, and whether that was an unreasonable promise and people are unreasonable about it, the fact of the matter is some amount of the Pathfinder community who bought the game on that promise and have been lovingly playing it for 10 years and buying everything that has come out for it are going to feel betrayed. And they have that right. Okay? And even they're saying, like, that said, it's important that we don't hop on an edition treadmill. So right now, they're already, setting themselves up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean...
yeah.
And I mean, like, this whole thing is because they anticipate this blowback.
Mm-hmm.
And that's smart. They really should anticipate this blowback. That tells me that somebody in there has a brain, because there's going to be blowback over this.
Yeah.
Because this whole paragraph explanation is, we enjoy playing Pathfinder as much as you do, and we want to play playing long into the future. As we develop the game over years and decades, we learn how we might improve it to make it easier, yada, yada, yada. As time goes on, gamers become more sophisticated, tastes change. New editions of the game are the only way to answer those changing tastes in a way that ideally improves the game for everybody. That said, it's important that we don't hop on an edition treadmill where a new Pathfinder version pops out every couple of years. By the time Pathfinder 2nd edition is released in 2019, it will have been 10 years since the release of Pathfinder 1st edition. That's an eternity in game years, and a good example of how we have no invention to reinvent the game on a frequent basis. Okay? They know that they're going to get blowback, but we need to point out they have some fuzzy math here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is also undeniable that Pathfinder was a set of house rules for 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. And when 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons was discontinued, it had already existed for 8 years. So really, the game that they have been supporting is 18 years old. And that is an eternity for one edition. Okay? I don't disagree with it. I don't disagree with the necessity of a new edition. But they are going to get some blowback because of the marketing they did, and that blowback is entirely valid.
I like the answer to this next question. This next question that is not a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It says, but I don't want to change editions. I want to play Pathfinder 1st edition forever and ever and ever. Okay, never mind. I'm just going to say that the way they presented that question, they have characterized the person presenting it.
They have done that.
Okay, and then I'm just going to read you the first sentence here. It says, that's awesome, and we're honestly proud to hear it. Which, if you're of a cynical turn of mind, might sound a lot like, hey, that's nice, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. That's great. Though, I mean, it is... They are also saying that, they're going to keep certain editions of the 1st edition rulebooks in print. Which I actually think is a dangerous move from a business standpoint.
It's the paperback pocket edition of the 1st edition rulebooks.
Right.
And of course, the PDFs will always be available.
And the 1st edition PDFs will always remain available. Yeah. We're not asking you to abandon 1st edition if you don't want to, but we are. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And then they're also doing the appeal to you to help us make the game you want to play. It's like, hey, but we're giving you a say in what 2nd edition is going to look like, just like 5th edition did. And the next question is even more interesting. Is Paizo in trouble? Are you doing this because you have to? Nope. Paizo is healthier than it has ever been. We have a larger editorial staff than at any time in the past. More than double the size of the staff that produced the Pathfinder RPG core rulebook. And our sales in 2017 were substantially higher than our sales in 2016. We're doing this because it is the time to do it, not because we have to. Now, there are two very interesting things that I see in this sentence, in this question and answer. And again, this is cynical me.
Right.
Okay? The first thing I would note is that if their sales in 2017 were substantially higher than their sales in 2016, then maybe this is not the right time to do this.
Sure.
Because maybe you're supposed to wait until this stuff sort of plateaus. Maybe. Now, I agree that they might be projecting a plateau in the near future. And those sales may have changed substantially. What they're selling, what specific product lines are selling better than others may have changed, and that's giving them a signal. Okay? But if your product is healthy and doing better than ever, it is not the time to take this risk. Because I'm going to say again, the first two, the two questions we read before this show, Paizo knows they're taking a risk. Okay, and they're trying to get out in front of it. They're trying to do damage control because they know a certain portion of their fan base is going to feel betrayed and upset. And you know why they know that? Because that's how they made their money.
Yeah.
Okay, because the people who bought Pathfinder to begin with were the people who got upset and betrayed when D&D changed editions. Okay, that's how they sold. They probably, though, feel that at this point, enough of their market is made up of people who aren't those people anymore, because it has been 10 years, that it's probably safe to do this. And I think that's a good assessment. The other thing I read in the "Is Paizo in trouble? Are you doing this because you have to?" Yada, yada, yada. That's what I like to call a suspiciously specific denial. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you assemble an FAQ, you get to pick the questions that you're answering. Right? Now, maybe they just foresee this as something that people are going to say. And so they're going to respond to it earlier rather than waiting until it's asked dignify it with a response. But it's weird that you included that question and the answer they did, and then they immediately found a few counter arguments. No, our editorial staff is bigger than ever and double the size, and our sales were higher, and it's like, no, we can prove it. It's like, it's kind of like it's the law. Don't answer questions that you weren't asked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you start talking about the size of your team and your sales numbers,
yeah,
it's like, so what aren't you talking about? That question makes me suspicious.
Well, really let me help you out.
Okay, go ahead.
I have 2 observations about this question and answer.
Please.
Okay, first observation is a lot of that, the way they answer that sounds like the way WotC answers how their sales numbers are doing.
Right?
Well, it's bigger every year. So I suspect there may be quite a bit of the same explanation just because there's, generally speaking, more people in general.
Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Again, if we were to look percentage of population, probably wouldn't find that much variance.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing that people forget when you're comparing sales numbers and sales growth.
Mm-hmm.
You don't care that the numbers are higher from year to year. I mean, it's always, obviously you don't want the numbers to be lower from year to year. That's a bad sign. But the rate at which those sales are increasing from year to year say a lot more about the health of your product.
Right.
So if the sales are 10% higher, like if in 2016 the sales were 10% higher, and then in 2017 they were 6% higher, that says that your growth is slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a much more telling number. As soon as a company tells me, well, our sales this year were higher than our sales last year, I'd say, great. That means that means you know how to run a company, but are you healthy?
Yeah.
Consider
also that 0.00001% is more than 0.
Well, they did say substantially. They did throw an adverb in there.
Yeah. All right. The other thing,
but for all we know, in 2016 they had a really crappy year.
Could be.
What could have made them or maybe they've had a number of bad years,
mm-hmm.
and now suddenly, maybe in the past 3 or 4 years, a competing product from a big company came out.
Maybe they published Starfinder.
Yeah. Oh, wow, I totally forgot about that. Good point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was the shot in the arm for their sales. Maybe they're losing to D&D right now.
Well, who knows? They're certainly not good and admit it anytime soon. But the other thing I want to point out is that by posing the question they have, is
mm-hmm.
Paizo in trouble? Are you doing this because you have to? And then answering it the way they have entirely reframed that question.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you can't ask that question about, well, maybe they've got too many modules and the game's too confusing. Is that a problem? Are you doing this because you have to consolidate? Oh no, our sales are blah, 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 blah. The question is now about sales and not about the state of the game.
Right. Ultimately, accepting the fact that Pathfinder RPG, I believe them when they say Pathfinder RPG is still a healthy problem.
Mm-hmm.
I believe them. But with accepting that fact, there is some reason, and I do not buy the creative, this is the time to do it, answer.
Right.
There is a business reason for them to be doing this now.
Yeah, you don't just do this stuff because one day you feel like it.
Right. That said, Paizo has made some questionable business choices in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you don't just do this.
Yeah, not something of this magnitude.
They did. They may not have had to do it. They may not have been forced to do it. But at the bottom line, there is some number on some spreadsheet somewhere that has told them this is a good idea to do now.
Right. And
your guess is as good as mine as to what that will be.
Uh-huh. You'll all be happy to know Wayne Reynolds is going to continue to contribute art. It was important enough to make a FAQ question out of. So there you go. That's
Didn't he
answered.
invent the goblins?
He might have. I don't know.
Like, I know he did a lot of the illustration, but the goblin has become like their icon. I hate their goblins, by the way. I absolutely despise the football head. They look like Stewie from the Family Guy.
Frankly, I kind of like them, but then that's just me.
They look like cartoons.
Apparently, Wayne. Okay, so this I feel like is important also in the Wayne Reynolds question. Okay. What you get hidden inside the Wayne Reynolds question is that they have been working on second edition for more than 2 years.
Right.
Okay.
Which I'm fine with that. That makes sense.
Yeah. But so this is a decision they made 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And really then has nothing to do with whether 2016 or 2017 was better in sales.
Yeah. This kind of invalidates that whole point, right? I'd like to know what the health of their company was 2 years ago then.
Yep.
Except that they could actually, like, if like things turned around and it's like, oh no, we're doing good again, they could put the brakes on this.
Right.
They really could.
Right.
And there are points where that would be a smart move and be like, oh, I guess it's not time. I guess we had a fluctuation or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I also actually like to know that I like that they've been working on this for 2 years and that this isn't going to be the mess that was the 5th edition open playtest.
Oh, you say that. You say that, but there's no way to tell yet.
Well, they're calling this a beta.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
If they've been working behind the scenes for 2 years,
mm-hmm.
and they see, look, here's the thing. They are selling their beta playtest rules
mm-hmm.
as a physical book, which they also did for the first Pathfinder.
Right.
Right? There was a physical playtest book that you could get or download or buy. Right? If I recall correctly. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong.
Of course they will.
Yeah.
That will probably be one of the many things they connect you on. Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, if they're doing that, because, wait, didn't FFG do the same thing with the Star Wars books?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. If they're doing that, they only want to put out one.
Yeah.
Which means that beta is mostly done.
Yeah.
They want to polish it.
Yep. You'll get a lot of errata as things go along.
Right. The beta will change, but the core mechanics will not change drastically. As someone who participated in the open D&D 5th edition playtest and also was under an NDA and can't disclose what other playtests might or might not have been participated in at any point,
mm-hmm.
There was a lot of changes at a very fundamental level to that game. Like I would not have even called some of what came out of those various tests an alpha at certain points.
Mm.
They were making really drastic changes to even core mechanics. It literally seemed like they had no idea what they were doing. Like they hadn't decided anything. They were just going to let the fans decide it.
Right.
This tells me that, number one, they already pretty much know what they want to do. And number two, it's probably not hugely different from the first Pathfinder, honestly. Which is, again, smart, Yeah.
They do say you're getting a new goblin iconic.
I don't care. I hate their goblin.
Let's see. So, okay.
Do we want to scroll down to the compatibility questions?
Yeah. All
right. So, sir, is Pathfinder 2nd edition compatible with the 1st edition of the game?
As much as 5th edition is compatible with 3.5.
Right? It's funny because once again, they all do the same. Like, I swear there's a form answer to this.
Uh-huh.
Because it was the 3rd edition, it was 4th edition, it was 5th edition. While many of the rules of the game have changed, much of what made Pathfinder great has remained the same. Which means no, it's not compatible because they're avoiding the question right there.
Right.
Okay? If they were compatible, then the first sentence would be, Yes.
Yeah.
Period.
Because full compatibility is a feature.
Right. It's something you advertise. It's a bullet point.
Right.
It's something the marketers. So no, what they are saying is the story of the game is unchanged, and in many cases you can simply replace the old rules with their new counterpart without having to alter anything else about the adventure. Which means all the mechanics and stat blocks won't work. Which is fine, but what they're basically saying is I can convert a Pathfinder Pathfinder First Edition module to Pathfinder Second Edition the same way I could convert a Pathfinder module to D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could just rip out the rules and replace them with the D&D rules. No kidding. Thank you for telling me you have not completely changed the structure of all role-playing games ever. Right? As for individual rules, like your favorite spell, monster, or whatever, most can be added with a simple conversion. Changing a few numbers, rebalancing some of the mechanics, and we've heard that before.
Yeah.
You had mentioned in the pre-show, what was it, the third edition? When third edition came out, there was the little booklet for if you wanted to convert your second edition stuff to third edition.
Right. Yeah. It was like 20 pages or something like that. And you'd have to walk through and it was mostly about converting your character. You'd have to walk through your character and with all this stuff and make all these adjustments. And you might as well just have started a new character instead of doing that.
Honestly, though, I believe it will be closer.
Well, this is the interesting thing because they point this out twice here. The next question is, what are the main differences in the new edition?
Mm-hmm.
At its core, the story of both games is essentially the same. That's twice they've said that now.
Right?
Which tells me, the only thing that really tells me is they are not entirely rebooting Galarion.
Right? We're not we're fourth edition where they smashed the Forgotten Realms into another planet and then set it all on fire and said, here's the Forgotten Realms now. Also, we killed half the gods.
Yeah.
Take that.
You still build your own character, venturing off on daring adventures, risking your life for a chance at fame and glory.
I thought they might change that.
Defeating deadly foes that threaten your friends, your family, and perhaps the very world itself. Okay, so it's a role-playing game. Still.
Right. Beyond
the narrative, there are many things that have changed, but mostly in the details of how the game works.
So what are the main differences in the new edition? Basically all the rules.
Yeah, all the rules are different.
We changed all the rules. Yeah. But don't worry, the story is still the same. An elf is still an elf. Completely different mechanics, but it's still an elf.
Yeah.
Which is great because that tells me that it has as much in common with each of the editions as Tolkien has with Pathfinder.
Apparently what they're doing is they're adding the alchemist to the choice of character classes.
Wouldn't that be funny if that was the only change?
Yeah, that's apparently...
this is all a big troll thing, and at the end, it's just, we added the alchemist.
Yeah, it's
change log, added alchemist.
The rule book includes all of the core classes from the first edition core rulebook, plus the alchemist.
That's the one. That was the thing, huh?
Yeah.
The alchemist was the one.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Isn't
the alchemist the one who throws grenades?
As far as I'm aware, the alchemist is the most broken character within the game.
Well, maybe they'll fix it.
Because there's something about infinite bombs. I don't know. Whatever. I don't know.
I am right though. The alchemist is the grenadier, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, fortunately, if I do actually convert to Pathfinder, I know which class I'm banning right off the bat.
It makes it easy. Where the changes really shine through is in how the game is played.
In other words. Oh my God. I hate this marketing double speak.
I'm not sure they've really changed how the game is played. They might have changed the manner in which it is played.
Right. Well, they were very clear. You still build a character, and presumably the GM still presents a situation, and you make a choice for what your character does in response to that situation.
And
some dice are rolled, and then something happens.
Yeah, dice happen, and then a thing happens, and then you repeat. So that's really how the game is played.
Right.
Okay, so we talked about the moves.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, they keep referring to them as the statistical bonus, and all I keep hearing is, remember how many times the creators of 5th edition mentioned bounded accuracy? all the numbers are smaller. Bounded accuracy, hooray!
Yeah.
This is the same.
Mm-hmm. Does the new version of Pathfinder find a better balance between spellcasters and martial characters? We certainly hope so, which means we have no idea. we really don't know yet.
Many of the changes made to the game attempt to address this issue by adding versatility and power to martial characters.
Uh-huh. We didn't nerf your spellcasters.
Right? But, this is, I understand everybody wants the 1,000 spells.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that's, the worst thing for these games.
Mm-hmm.
They really do.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
We haven't nerfed your spellcasters, but boy, look out for the punchers. Spells have been redesigned to ensure that they are of the right power when first acquired, but diminish in utility over time, giving spellcasters the tools they need to contribute while giving other characters a chance to shine with their abilities.
Honestly, instead of diminishing over time,
mm-hmm.
It would be neat if there were a smaller number of spells that just leveled up.
Right.
Your Burning Hands becomes a fireball, becomes a meteor swarm, and it's just one spell that levels with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't have to remember that you have 4 different options for throwing fire. But again, I'm back to, let's just reduce the spell list down to something that people can keep in their heads.
Yeah. Let's get through some of the rest of these really quickly. Did you fix my problem with Pathfinder? Nope, that's too open-ended. We can't possibly answer whether we did or not.
Can check back on our site for more of the latest news and previews.
Does the game still use miniatures? In as much as you have ever been required to use miniatures for an RPG, sure.
well, they do have the partnership with WizKids.
Yes, WizKids and Reaper.
Right, so they can't say no.
They will be getting you a whole batch of new miniatures for 2.0. That'll be great. To match the new look from WizKids and Reaper. That'll be great. Will Paizo convert all existing Pathfinder books? I don't hardly think so.
Their editorial staff isn't that big.
Yeah.
Not directly, but many of the most popular parts will find their way into the new edition over time. The Alchemist, for example. Did you know The Alchemist is being added?
Oh, wow.
And archetypes have been made a core part of the game. Fine.
Yeah. Will you republish or convert classic content? What about Rise of the Rune Lords or the Oracle or the Gorans?
Isn't that a curse from Serenity?
Yeah, you would think
Gorans?
so. Kingmaker or the Emerald Spire or the Gunslinger. Yeah, okay. The core rules, folks, are first. Everything else is up for debate. Is essentially what this answer is.
We're gonna re-release everything all at once.
Yeah. This is like you're way ahead of us. Just hang on. Let us get the thing out the door first, and then we'll see what we want to do after that.
But remember to tell us which things you love, and we promise we'll move those to the top of the conversion list.
Mm-hmm. Will there be a conversion guide? The rulebook, the playtest rulebook, will be offering a sort of cheat sheet to help you with some of the big changes in the game. But there's no detailed guide.
Yeah, but that's just in the playtest rulebook.
Right, just the playtest stuff.
Because they'd rather have you try the new stuff than convert.
Which is the only thing this FAQ is speaking to at all, is the new stuff. So they got stuff about the playtest, which starts on August 2nd, which starts with the release of the Pathfinder playtest rulebook and the Pathfinder playtest adventure. There's the open playtest will last several months, kicks off in August with character creation and the first of the 7 parts of the Pathfinder playtest adventure. Take a few weeks to focus on each section, giving you a chance to play it with your friends and submit feedback in the form of detailed experience surveys. Please only answer the questions we ask.
Please. We know you're mad. Just answer the questions we ask.
That's right. That's right. There's lots of ways to play before August 2nd. All of them require that you go to a convention.
Yep.
There's a list. You can look that up later. I'm not going to read it out. Are you really going to listen to our feedback? No, of course we aren't. We just want to make you feel like you're being heard without actually having to do anything about. Oh, wait, no. They wrote, absolutely. We'll have a survey system in place that will collect feedback on a weekly basis. It will be categorized and easily sortable on our end. Garbage. We'll make sure that voices are heard and tweaks can be made. I realize that's kind of a cynical read, but
it is kind of funny that they even included that question.
Yeah.
Because that's the sort of, no company would admit if the answer wasn't yes,
the question wouldn't be there.
They wouldn't admit it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even ask the question. Yeah.
That's a we want to make you feel good question. So then they have some more information about responses to the feedback, and the final one in this little section is the interesting bit. How will the playtest version of the rules relate to the final version? That depends entirely on you and the rest of the playtest community. We have no idea.
Lies. It's going to be really close.
2 years, folks. 2 years.
Yeah, it's going to be close. And you can guarantee that they've been doing a lot of playtesting already.
Mm-hmm.
If they're smart.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I know 5th edition came out okay, and a lot of people are very happy with it, and D&D is now doing well. But everything about the lead up to 5th edition was desperation.
Right.
It was the desperation of a company that knew it was in trouble. It's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Okay. It was done really badly.
Paizo,
look, I just want to, Paizo, I have said this before. They have made some decisions that I don't agree with, but Paizo is generally a pretty well-run company. And they're very good at supporting their product and supporting their consumer base. To the point where I'm even holding back because I really wanted to make a specific joke. You know what? I'm going to make it anyway because they don't deserve anything from me. It seems like they're incorporating a lot of changes from D&D 5th edition and some from D&D 4th edition. And that just proves they still can't write a role-playing game of their own. They have to copy someone else's. You know? That's my snarky remark.
Right.
But truth be told, despite making fun of this, I think that they're doing this release right. They're smart to expect blowback. They're going to get some blowback. But unlike the blowback that Wizards of the Coast received, I don't think this can hurt them because there's nowhere really for the people to go. You know? Nobody's offering the alternative. Nobody's offering the Pathfinder of Pathfinder.
Right.
And this was exactly the place that D&D was in before Pathfinder, where you converted or you were just out of luck. You know, when first edition rolled over to second edition rolled over to third edition, you converted or, you know, I mean, you could be the OSR, but we've already talked about that.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, you converted or you were out of luck, and that was the end of it because nobody had the option. The open gaming license that Wizards of the Coast used for third edition is the only thing that allowed third edition to survive as Pathfinder. And their refusal to offer Paizo any sort of licensing to support fourth edition the same way they'd been supporting third edition was such a betrayal to Paizo that Paizo turned around and used the open gaming license to keep third edition alive. You know? So like that was the business reality of where Pathfinder came from. You know, and I have no judgment on Pathfinder. That said, I think Paizo is handling this as best they can possibly handle it.
Sure. I
think they're going to get some blowback. I don't think it's going to be as serious as it would have been a couple of years ago. Like, I do think that they're now probably safe from the worst of the blowback at this point.
Right.
And me personally, I'm going to check it out. I like Pathfinder. The problem was Pathfinder did the canon lockout thing, where there was just too much for it that I no longer had any interest in keeping up. And, you know, ultimately, this is... And that's the main driver of new editions is when the old edition is so big that there's nowhere to start. Okay? It's like, the new 52. It's Superboy punching a hole in reality to reset everything so that we can start the clock and get over and get new fans. And that's really what it is. And that suggests to me that the main driver of this is that their growth is slowing down. They're not getting new players the way they were, and they're not sure how to bring them. Because it's just, there's not a good entry point to Pathfinder anymore. The core rulebook is basically, if you show up with just the Pathfinder core rulebook to any organized play event or convention or gaming store, you will be laughed away from that gaming table. That's the reality of what Pathfinder is now. So they have to do this. It's the only way to make the game approachable again. So, anyway.
Can we go down to my favorite question? Because there's stuff in here about campaign settings and organized play and OGL compatibility and licensed products and
none of which I can actually speak to.
Yeah, adventure card game, blah 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 blah.
I like the adventure card game. It's fun.
I've played it once. It was okay.
That's my big input to that. I like the adventure card game. It's kind of fun.
Well, then you'll enjoy the fact that they're working on a redesign.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which means it's another. They're working on a new adventure card game.
Yes, basically. Anyway, my favorite question in the whole thing here is this one. It's at the very bottom of the page. Will you be doing a new edition of Starfinder 2? Starfinder came out last year. It's like the newest thing going. Why?
Right?
Why would they do a new edition? Why? Why is this even a question?
Like, the fact that they put that question in thinks that they do assume that a certain number of their fans are stupid.
Yes. Yeah, I think nobody's even... until they asked that question, nobody was even thinking that.
Right. I cannot imagine anybody who's like, oh man, now we're going to have to redo Starfinder.
Yeah.
It's like...
But many of the rules innovations they debuted in last year's Starfinder core rulebook were born as changes to the in-development Pathfinder 2nd Edition game.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the new Pathfinder is already baked into the Starfinder system.
You know what? That actually doesn't surprise me very much.
Well,
and I should have thought of it.
Remember how they tested rules for 4th edition D&D?
And 3rd edition
and
D&D.
3rd edition D&D. They did it on the Star Wars game.
Right. Well, they did it in a number of places.
Yeah. A couple of different things.
Yeah, there was Book of Nine Swords, which for 3rd edition that was testing the idea of martial powers for 4th edition. But even if you go back earlier, people forgot about this one. The 3rd edition combat engine was basically shaken down in player's option combat and tactics. About half the rules didn't make it to 3rd edition because they were clunky.
Mm-hmm. But
the basic combat engine for 3rd edition was based on the combat and tactics rules in 2nd edition. And they later said, yeah, that's exactly what we did. Also, Dungeonscape, one of my favorite books for 3rd edition, along with Cityscape. Dungeonscape debuted the idea of monster rolls and the changes to the encounter building that formed the core of the 4th edition monster and encounter design.
Yeah.
So it's not on you. Like, companies do this all the time. They test one product in another.
Sure.
Hell, half the custom rules that I have written on my website for D&D are tests for something I'm not writing.
Yeah. That only makes sense.
Derp.
Yeah. I'm interested on one hand, but not so interested that I feel like I needed to run out and be part of the play test, especially not with them charging for the books.
Well, to be fair though, you can they are making the playtest PDF available for free. Right.
They are. That is true. Right. We need to point that out. They're also so the playtest rulebook is 400 pages.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be available in 3 editions, softcover, hardcover, and deluxe hardcover with foil embossed faux leather cover and ribbon bookmark. Why you need to do that on a playtest book, I don't know.
Well, so that you can say I was. Yeah, it's for the same reason that the DS ambassadors exist.
Right. The playtest rulebook, the adventure playtest, and the flip mat playtest are all limited quantities. They have no intention of reprinting them. So if you want one of these, you're going to have to jump on it really sharp like.
Yeah. Well, though I would imagine that they're going to have that. I mean, they say limited quantity, but they're probably better at. Oh, okay. So I found the prices though.
Okay, lay them on me.
Because there is a pre-order form.
Right.
For the playtest rulebook, the soft cover is $29.99. The hardcover, $44.99, which actually is not bad for a 400-page rulebook, hardbound rulebook. And the deluxe hardcover with the faux leather cover and the ribbon bookmark and the foil debossed. What is? I don't even want to. Is $59.99.
Right.
The adventure is going to be $24.99, and the flip mat multi-pack, which is the maps for the playtest adventure. Are you kidding me? The maps for the playtest adventure are going to be another $25.
Yeah.
Okay, that sucks. That's the thing. That burns me. I'd pay $30 for the softcover playtest.
Would you?
Out. Yeah, I would.
You wouldn't just download the PDF?
Nah, I can't read on PDF.
Okay.
I cannot read anything on a PDF. I can't read electronically. I can't even read on a Kindle.
Fair enough.
I have to have a physical book. I have tried so many times.
Okay, don't come apart on me.
Works. I just can't do it. I can't do it, man. I can't do it.
All right. So that's,
There's not more to say. There really isn't.
I would help you guys out by reading the FAQ for the organized play and the OGL and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to do that because we're out of time.